We're once again with author Robert M. Stanley, author of Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you for having me back, Alfred.
You know, the area of Archons, which is the area that we're going to be covering today, has always been an elusive one. And I guess that is in the nature of Archons.
Yeah.
And so I'm really going to let you sort of lead us through this subject matter. You sent us a very intriguing kind of a statement. And what exactly are Archons, and why should we worry about them?
Okay, well, according to what I've discovered, based on the work of Carlos Castaneda, which apparently was based on Toltec warrior teachings from God knows when, there are these a type of parasite that it looks like an amoeba to me. I think he called them the flyers. And it turns out that these things are insinuating themselves into our consciousness and causing us to have negative emotions and to do negative things to each other and ourselves, solely for the purpose of feeding off of that negative energy that is generated in the process. So that caused me some concern when I read it. I mean, I'm familiar with Castaneda's work, but for some reason it took me a while to, when I reread it recently, something clicked in my head. I thought, wait a minute, the way he's describing these dark, shadowy, round, he said they look like dark, fat fish that could fly and sort of jump, and they were just beyond the normal range of our vision. I thought, wait a minute, this reminds me of what Trevor James Constable had taken pictures of way back in the 50s. So I did a comparative analysis, and that's why I sent you that press release, is because my thinking has evolved sort of beyond what I had reported in my second book, Covert Encounters in Washington, D.C. I thought that there were individuals among us who were being possessed by demonic entities from another dimension or a higher frequency beyond our vision. But it turns out, according to what Castaneda wrote, based on his teachings, or the knowledge that he gained from Don Juan Matus, I guess an ancient Toltec warrior, that these beings were basically our greatest nemesis, that they were, they had a collective consciousness that was using us sort of like the way we use cattle, and that they were provoking us and getting into our minds, that they were the, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this, you have a, you hear a voice in your head, and normally you think it's yourself. But what he was claiming was that this isn't the fact, that there is a, let's just call it, in the conscious mind, we separate it between the conscious and the subconscious. Well, what if our conscious mind has actually been hijacked by these entities whose primary purpose is sort of like sharks, they just exist to feed. That's it. And essentially that's what these flyers, as he called them, or earlier what Trevor James Constable called the skyfish. He recognized that these were, even though they kind of look like UFOs, they look more like amoeba. They're definitely a natural thing. I mean, Castaneda and other the Gnostics call them inorganic. But I'm not sure that's actually true. It may be that they're just, they look like amoeba, so they must have an organic or biological basis, especially if they feed off of our energy. But they may just not, their frequency that they exist in may be lower than what we consider to be this third dimension. That's my best understanding of it.
Right. So now, some of the predators that have been thought to kind of feed on our 3D human mind, or try to lower the vibrational frequency or keep us in fear,
right,
have been thought to be the fourth dimensional. Some people say Orion Greys or Draco and Hydra reptilians.
Right.
How do you see these archons relating to the dimensional ecology between or among the fourth dimensional grays that we know that those exist because there are at least 6 million adults in the U.S. who say that they've witnessed grays and have been abducted by them, and that's the 2002 Roper poll. So we have eyewitnesses to grays. We have eyewitnesses to the reptilians. Some of the whistleblowers say that they are doing very predatory acts.
Yes.
And that they're acting on. Sorry, I just wanted to finish this one thought. That the reptilians and those grays that are collaborating with the reptilians are really predating on the human soul. So I'd like to put the soul area on the table.
Okay.
Now, how does that relate to the archons?
If we're talking about by soul, if you mean the energy field around us, or perhaps that is primarily the motivating force for who we are, our consciousness, let's say, then yes, I would agree that there is something, or maybe some group of things that are actually feeding off of this. Now, when I look back at the archives on this, the history is a little unclear because the word archon shows up in so many different parts of our the history. I mean, for example, in Greek, it just means lord or ruler. Okay, so it's a little bit ambiguous in that regard. The Gnostics who were considered, there was a specific branch that were considered pagan. They weren't Christian, okay? And they apparently had more ability to see into these other dimensions or higher frequencies of consciousness. And that's when they started to describe, I mean, there's more than two kinds. Most people in metaphysical community right now seem to focus on either there's two specific descriptions they focus on, which is a reptilian, which I agree with, that there is reptilian demons or archons. But there's also, a lot of people are jumping to the conclusion that one version of these archons that are parasitic are the Greys. And I disagree completely, and that's why I issued the press release, because did you look at the pictures?
Yes, they seem kind of egg-like, and we'll be placing the pictures in a special slideshow.
Great.
In the article.
So most people have never seen that. Most people actually have not read Castaneda, even though he's very famous as an author and an anthropologist. But they just don't know. They've never seen actual images. They figured this guy was just making it all up. And a lot of people dismiss the Gnostics because, unfortunately, most of what their library, their records were destroyed in the Library of Alexandria when it was burned. So we really don't know exactly what they knew. We only have that one text, the Nag Hammadi, which is actually quite old. But again, like what Castaneda was drawing on information that was passed on for many, many, many generations. And the Gnostics, again, are sort of running a parallel course as far as describing these entities that they insinuate themselves into our minds for, in essence, just to provoke us so that we will generate negative emotions that they can then feed off of and become stronger. So, again, I'm not sure exactly why people assumed that when the Gnostics, when they talk about one group of archons actually looking like a unformed fetus, they say that's got to be the Greys. But as I showed you that picture, an embryo at 8 weeks actually looks almost identical with the one eye inside the egg. Okay, it actually looks more similar to, if not identical to, the skyfish or the flyers that we were discussing that I posted in the press release. This is a whole nother species, and they're clearly not humanoid, but they prey on humans. And again, this is why I keep referring to them as parasites, because I think that's the most applicable term to use for them.
Now, would this be something that through the ages, different spiritual sects, religious sects, in all of the cultures, they have talked of as, quote, evil spirits?
Yes. Well, I mean, let's focus on Central America. Who do you think was influencing the leaders to commit human sacrifice? Who were they sacrificing human lives to? I mean, isn't this exactly the scenario that we're discussing here? Is that, I mean, what generates more fear and anguish in a human being than being, ritually slaughtered for the gods? You know, that clearly shows to me that these archons have been around, and they're still around. They're still around. You know, this what we were seeing, as you call it, the permanent war economy, may not just be for political reasons. It may be, as I stated in my second book, that the world leaders are constantly being manipulated by these entities, these unseen entities, to guide us on a course where we're constantly sacrificing human life and justifying it in such a way that people actually generate more and more of that energy for these parasitic beings.
Now, there is a formulation of that that is called, quote, satanic, or the
Yes.
dark forces.
Right.
And there's evidence that certain sectors of the power structure, the Illuminati power structure, the what they call the dark monarchies, the House
Yep.
of Windsor, the House of Orange, certain of the financial areas, the secret societies, the intelligence agencies are permeated by these, quote, satanically oriented societies that use ritual sacrifice. They drink the blood of babies, ingesting the human soul, all of these kinds of things. And Satan is said to be an individual. Part
Right.
of Satan was Lucifer's lieutenant in an actual extraterrestrial revolt somewhere in the human past. There's all kinds of versions of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a picture of actual fourth dimensional and third dimensional individuals. It's not really this archonic sort of thing. So is that just a projection of stories onto what is really an archonic kind of brainwashing to keep us going?
It seems to be that way, Alfred. It seems to be that these higher entities are influencing us to do their bidding. And a lot of people are completely unaware of it, especially if you're hearing a voice in your head and you think it's yours. You're going to act on it, typically. So this is, again, one of the reasons why it's so important to, I think, to at least discuss the fact that we're not just dealing with obvious type of humanoids like reptilians, or even just regular humans that are traveling throughout the galaxy and have very evil intent. I mean, for all we know, one of the things that crossed my mind is it's possible that these parasitic amoeba-like creatures, the flyers, whatever you want to call them, it's possible that they have attached themselves to reptilian humanoids and other humanoids throughout the galaxy.
I see.
And what you're describing is a hierarchy. I was unable to locate the data. I was referring to you through email communication,
Right.
but I did see this. I think it might have been a Catholic version of the Legion of Demons, and how there's a hierarchy, like you said, Satan may be at the top, and then there's all these commanders and lieutenants, etc. But coincidentally, I got this anecdote. Got to get this anecdote yesterday. I'm driving down the highway in the small town where I live. Right, it's really a small town, folks, and I mean this. I come up on this young. It looked like a young man in a fairly new looking car, and on the back he has a sticker that says "Hail Satan." Then there's a pentagram. Another one says "Heretic," and then an upside down cross. And I looked at it, and something came over me. I mean, I wasn't mad at him. I just felt like, how dare you? How dare you? What do you think you're doing? You're advertising the fact that you you worship Satan, that you're a part of his minions, that was totally unacceptable to me. So I followed the guy around, and I was projecting my light towards him, you know. Right. And it was, you know, at some point he got nervous. After about 5 minutes of me driving around behind him, he pulled over, and I pulled over and I blocked him. And he didn't get out, I didn't get out, but I mentally was saying to him, you don't belong here.
Yeah.
You do not belong here. You got to go and don't come back. You are not welcome here.
Wow.
And then I drove off, and he beat his horn, and then, you know, he took off. It was just, that's never happened before, okay? Uh-huh. Hopefully it won't happen again. But it was really, it really kind of shocked me. Like, wow, there are people out there that literally would advertise this fact, that they're proud that they follow Satan. That's crazy to me.
Right. Well, there's that, as you yourself have researched, Satanism is an accepted belief system in the U.S. Armed Forces.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. But now, so what you're saying is that if we go to the more fundamental level, it's these archonic cells that are the more fundamental level that are forcing organic beings like humans, like reptilians, like greys even, to begin to engage in a pattern of good versus evil or harmful versus helpful actions. Mm-hmm. Is that more or less what you're saying?
Yeah. It's they say the survival of the fittest. You know, that there's, again, this, sharks or wolves. You know, they hunt in packs, and I think that's what we're dealing with here. Is something that, according to Castaneda, this is something that we can defeat individually. He didn't say anything about collectively. He suggested that individually, that if once we can start to control the internal dialogue of our conscious mind, that these particular amoeba-like creatures can't handle that. Once we really focus our mind and our intent, which to me is let's be really honest about this. I want to be free. I want to be liberated from this. I don't want them, being insinuating themselves into my mind or provoking me or manipulating me or anybody else around me, actually, for that matter. I think their time on this world is up. They cannot be exposed. They know that they're done. Once they are fully exposed, they cannot continue what they're doing. In that regard, they're actually very vulnerable. So I think this is why it's important to not only just discuss it, but look at the pictures and the press release, or actually what you're going to show here, and think about this. These things are just beyond our range of vision. Now, with a little bit of technology, obviously, the pictures at Trevor James Constable, most of them were infrared. Did you know that most cameras, actually all cameras, commercial cameras, have a filter, an infrared filter built in, so we can't actually photograph what's in the infrared? Because normally you would take a picture with a camera that didn't have that filter in there. You would be taking pictures of stuff and going, man, I didn't see that. I mean, that's not the color of it, because our eyes don't see that. Right.
Well, I am just thinking whether, this is from my training as a graduate psychotherapist. I am just thinking that the various categories of, quote, mental illness as defined in the DSM-4, that especially those where you have outside ideation that comes in. Mm-hmm. Schizophrenia, for example. Right. Where you have voices that are telling you various destructive things. Mm-hmm. Do you think that what we call mental illness could in fact be some component of the archons having a certain access to the organism that they wouldn't have in otherwise healthy organisms?
I agree with what you're saying, but I don't think it's that simple. We're talking about extreme cases. I think that everybody is vulnerable to this if we don't acknowledge that it's a possibility or that it's a reality,
Okay.
People will just ignore it and say, well, I'm just feeling angry today.
Yeah.
Or seriously, I just need a drink right now. And mind control is something that the elite has wanted to use on us for a long time. We know that. But the subtle aspect of all of this, that these creatures could literally be speaking to us in a way that we assume is our own thoughts, is extremely subtle and profound and very dangerous, And what he said, it was, Castaneda turned it this way: it's the subject of, or the topic of all topics. And he was very careful, as many books as that Castaneda wrote over I think it was a period of 20 years. He waited till the very last book, pretty much, to divulge this topic, because he knew it would be so controversial. Of all the things that he talked about, this would be the most controversial. And clearly, when I started putting out the press release, I was surprised. Some of the people were, I wouldn't say attacking me, but, making some pretty harsh accusations at me, like, are you drunk? What's the matter with you? Why can't you see that this is wrong? And look, I think we should at least discuss it. If you have evidence that I'm wrong, fine. But if you want to just make a supposition because it's more comfortable for you to dismiss what I'm saying or theorizing, because if I'm right, if my perception of this is right, we actually have a very key window, an opportunity here to address the problem in a way that we haven't done before collectively.
Now, there have been other writers aside from Castaneda, for example, John Lash. I know that you and I have talked about his work. How do you see his work on the Archon issue?
I agree with a lot of what he says, except for the fact that, that he says that he, again, jumps to the conclusion what the Gnostics were talking about were the Greys. I don't think so. People, look, they didn't describe, Castaneda or the Gnostics didn't describe those creatures as looking like infants. Infants are the ones that have the bald heads with the big eyes, and sort of a skinny body. A fetus, actually, they said specifically, an unformed fetus would be an embryo. You look at an embryo, and it's just an egg. It's a plasma. You know what I mean? And it has, typically from the side, it only has one eye. This is what these things look like. It's not an eye. I believe it's a mouth or some sort of communication brain. I don't know. This is unfortunately, I think, this is not going to go over well with people. I kind of knew when I issued the press release that people were going to say this is nonsense. But I urge you to look at the pictures and think about what the information, the way I laid it out. Okay, and I'm updating that pretty much every day when I get new information or photographs. I'm constantly trying to update it because this is an evolutionary process. It's a process of discovery for me, as well as mankind. I kind of think this dovetails with the whole concept of ascension, that we really can't go to the next level of consciousness if something is constantly insinuating itself into our minds.
Now, that kind of gets to the next question. Mm-hmm. Let's assume that the Archons are there and they account for our condition in 3D. What can we do now? What can we do about the Archons? I mean, not so much at the individual level, that is, one can just, be mindful and kind of not add effect of them. But collectively, as a species, how can we rid ourselves of these predators?
Good question. I actually had a flash of intuition that the event that's coming up on 11/11/11, which is just a few days away from now, that the group meditations that are going to occur, specifically the one I had initiated or invited people to, we're sending our soul light to the core of the sun, earth, and moon. As that positive energy is going into these spheres and then radiated back out, I really think that's going to push these guys back, or if nothing else, just weaken their grip on people's consciousness. I don't know how long or how effective it will be. I guess that depends on how many people do it. But I can speak from experience. Okay, when we did this thing on was it October 28th? The first one we did right at the end, so-called the end of the Mayan calendar, visualizing light going to Washington D.C., London, and Rome. I got up before dawn that morning and actually started my meditation or visualization, and I was shocked at how much energy flashed through me, and actually it almost like it was like enveloped me, because I started calling down the light. I thought I was calling it down to those places, but I actually felt myself enveloped in it, and it was overwhelming. I mean,
right.
Emotionally, I wasn't prepared for that. I wasn't expecting that. So I think something is going on, Alfred, and I know I'm having a hard time articulating it, but to answer your question, yes, I think collectively there's a lot we can do, and for anybody who tries to tell us differently, I disagree with their position completely. I think that it's imperative, it's incumbent upon us to help ourselves through this. Like Castaneda said, this is a test. It's not a test of the emergency broadcasting system. This is a test. Actually, it was Don Juan told him, this is the way of the universe is testing us. I believe once we get past this particular obstacle, there'll probably be more obstacles that we have to deal with. But if we can't get past this one basic thing, we will not evolve our consciousness. We will not be allowed to gain access to higher levels of consciousness, which obviously there's more responsibility that comes with that. There's one thing I wanted to address with you and your audience today real quick, was the press release from the White House regarding the petition. I thought that was the height of absurdity, considering I have spent dedicated 6 years or more of my life to studying what's going on with extraterrestrial activity in Washington, D.C. For them to blatantly lie and say there is no credible evidence that extraterrestrials are here, that they do exist, right, that they're interacting with us on a covert level, right. It's criminal. It is criminal, and I think someday somebody, actually quite a few people, are going to be held accountable for this by no one other than the people, because our current Constitution allows for this, that we can actually hold these people accountable, and we should, because it's a malfeasance of justice for them to allow these predators to exist in our midst without them doing anything to protect us. In fact, they seem to be in cahoots. Whether they know it or not, they are in cahoots. And by telling everybody there's nothing going on, you're actually, what do you call it, accessory to the crime. And I don't know how else to put that.
Right. Well, we have just about two minutes left in this segment, and I wondered if there were any final thoughts that you'd like to leave our audience with regard to the subject of archons, that I agree seems to be the neglected subject in this whole interdimensional discussion.
It is, Alfred, and it's very touchy, because most people don't want to even consider that their own mind has been invaded in that way. It's just so blatant. But as I say, I told you the story about the little boy, young boy, who I thought was possessed. He was acting like, completely off his rocker, and crashed into that window because he thought he could fly. I got the feeling something was in the room. I couldn't identify it. It has taken me, that was 1985, taken me a long time, over 20 years, before it started to make sense. So I don't think that this discussion we're having now is by accident. It's a natural progression, and I think we need to discuss this more, especially as more evidence comes to light.
Right.
I've only had a short time to put this information together, but I think that, in fact, I know I'm getting feedback from people who've had similar experiences, so I'll be glad to share that with you, or anyone who wants to contact me at unicusmagazine.com. If you have any more information about this, or experiences you want to make known publicly, I'd certainly like to hear from you.
Yeah, well, we have been following your work with regard to the UFO phenomenon in Washington, D.C., and it is very deep and profound. And so I welcome a collaborative effort with you in this new, very key interdimensional subject of archons.
Oh, thank you, Alfred. And I think that is part of the solution, is us working together, recognize that we have a common adversary, and that it's to our all mutual benefit to stand together in peace and harmony, and recognize that someone's provoking us to attack each other. That's got to stop. That has to stop.
Exactly. Good. Well, thank you very much, Robert, and we look forward to when you'll be with us next on the subject of archons.
Thank you, Alfred.
Thank you. Honored to have Laura Magdalene Eisenhower with us. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Alfred. Thanks for having me.
Well, you know, we've just spent the last half hour with Robert Stanley on the subject of archons, and he has shown us a number of photographs, which I think you've seen, of entities that are just below the visible spectrum of electromagnetic energy that he says may be archons. Mm-hmm. And I know that you have a very broad view of the function that sort of the origin of archons and what their function might be. And I wondered if you could share with us what you understand archons are, what their source are, how they intervene in our environment, and what we might do about this.
Right, okay. Well, I mean, this goes into kind of creation mythology that isn't so much based on different cultural views. It's based on Gnostic information from the Nag Hammadi and, other texts. Particularly John Lamb Lash's research discusses it a lot, which I think is the most accurate out there. There are two distinct types of archons. One is a fetal or embryonic type. The other is a draconic or reptilian type. And so what's interesting is we hear about these lower entities of an extraterrestrial nature, and those are basically archons. And the origination of them starts from, the galactic core, the pleroma, the Godhead, and how the Godhead energies expanded beyond its borders and created a leak. And when that leak happened, that energy had consciousness, of course, because it was coming from source. And that consciousness wanted to bring itself back into, the pleroma, which is considered, the highest of heavens. Definitely just the vibration of the dreaming energies of the Creator. And that energy, which it can be considered, its lowest level of form, before we hit matter, is what created the duality. Because once we enter the physical realm, and once things start to take physical form, one is in the mode of identification with that process. And when identification starts to happen, it produces duality. And the two dualities that were created were the aeons and the archons. The aeons would be considered the higher portion of it. The aeons were within the pleroma, and the archons are that energy when it's outside of it, which has both positive and negative. The negative is birthed from, just the confusion, the bewilderment, and the fear that consciousness had. And so what we see in this story is that we're all emanations of this energy, where our chakra system holds all this information. Our multidimensional nature and the multiverse, the cosmos, holds this information as well, holds these energies as well. So when we, connect to it, and we experience it, we need to understand that it's just as much within us as it is in our external. As much as it's a part of the creative energy of our world, it's a part of the creative energy within ourselves. It's connected to God, but there's a portion of it that lives in separation, which is what we're here to experience on Earth, is how to bridge that separation back to wholeness. So we experience archonic energies when we're in separation mentality or when we're in duality. We'll find that we have good days, bad days, we're ruled by successes, failures, rights, wrongs, and everything is, black or white. There's no real wholeness or integration. So the archons like to feed on any kind of weakness, and it acts kind of as a big slap in the face that a person's kind of out of balance. And it ends up being a very alchemical and catalytic force to our restoration as a humanity and as a planet. So this is what we're seeing in our world today when we look at the global elite, when we look at the Illuminati, and how much they have thrived on our imbalance and our ignorance. And, you know, that takes the form of the reptilians and the greys. And what's very interesting about this is that, you know, the reptilians and greys, they want to take over planet Earth through covert mind control methods. And that's to keep us separate from our organic nature, separate from Gaia, separate from the unity consciousness, which is what the pleroma represents. So it's about our chakra system, and that's how people can relate to it the most. To me, the archons rule the lower chakras, and the aeons are like what connects us to source, and they represent the heart chakra and beyond. And that's what the higher races represent, that when we're connecting to higher races, our higher self, or just higher energies and a higher awareness, it bridges us back to source. If we're in our lower chakras, we tend to be very much ruled by that archonic nature. And the chief ruler of the archons is called the demiurge, which is what the biblical Old Testament God is, and what a lot of religions worship without realizing that it's actually an extraterrestrial entity that rules by deception, rules by secrecy and manipulation and fear. And for us to get over this, we need to look within and discover and find out where we're being played and where we're not stepping up to our power and where we're out of balance.
Right. Now, some of the areas in which people have said that archons are active over history were the areas that shamans have been active in. For example, exorcism from, quote, possession by demons. Mm-hmm. Do you see that phenomenon of possession by demons or the demonic force as kind of a materialization or a personification of the archonic kind of, you know, entities?
Absolutely. I mean, they are basically demons. I mean, they're the reason they're, you know, lower chakra in a sense is they're ruling that part of who we are. But they, you know, are kind of running the show as being the puppet masters, the controllers. And so when we're relating to it on a third chakra level, it throws us into fear, it throws us into anguish, and it throws us into survival. And when we're not connecting to our higher consciousness, it makes us vulnerable to be possessed, makes us vulnerable to feeding into addictions or lower based, you know, temptations that, you know, it can also make one vulnerable to demonic possession. So there's both the power-hungry and the greedy kind of possession, and then there's the unintegrated, unaware, ignorant, and full of fear, and, you know, turning towards addiction and escapism sort of possession. And the reptilian archonic energies and that whole system feed on that. And so, you know, I always consider that this earth is basically possessed by the archonic system, which came about before the earth was formed. And that the Gaia energy, the source energy, morphed into the physical planet, you know, is in this process of allowing us and awakening us through the wheel of karma and the zodiac by helping us see the difference so that we can restore the tree of life and get over this demonic consciousness that rules the planet. So, you know, in a sense, the earth needs an exorcism, and it's us as humans that are the main target for the possession, because as long as we're possessed, we are acting as their agents. No matter how much we fight against it, we're still acting as their agents as long as we're feeding it and as long as we're staying in that duality, or we're not in our wholeness or in recognition of our true origins that are far higher than the archonic system, except the problem is the archonic system came about before the earth was formed, which made humanity very vulnerable to being led astray by it.
Right. And, you know, one of the points that was being made in Robert Stanley's interview, which I found very interesting, is that if you look at the different extraterrestrial races, we're of the human ET race, but you have reptilian ET races, you have insectoid ET races, you have feline ET races, you have gray ET races, that all of these ET races are also subject to the archons, because the archons are kind of these entities that influence ourselves as beings. And even if we have been able to expel, say, some of the more predatory races like the Draco-Reptilians and the Orion Greys, that's just one layer of the onion. So now we've come up against the next layer of the onion, which are the Archons, which have really been holding this planet hostage and humanity hostage. How do you see the exorcism of planet Earth now proceeding? How is that going to occur?
Right, right. So yeah, in a sense, the Archons, those lower races act as their agents, and then, yes, the chief Archon is the veil that is covering Earth, that keeps us from the higher consciousness universal family. So the way I see us, creating this exorcism is unity consciousness, is understanding the myths, really, because, you see Persephone abducted by Hades, and people have to understand these myths exist in our soul. This is the story of our soul and our history. So that divine feminine energy has been exiled, been sort of kidnapped and abducted in our own consciousness and our own awareness. So if we understand the myths, we can sort of see the story that's playing out. We see that because that part of ourselves is missing or we're not in touch with it, we are, in a sense, held hostage by this archonic force, which represents Hades, which represents Jehovah or Enlil, what some call Yahweh, but there's others that consider Yahweh higher than that. But, with names and terminologies, it gets kind of confusing. But in a sense, we are held hostage by this force, that has the reptilian and gray agents. And this is where these myths come in, because the whole journey of death and resurrection was not so much about the story of Christ. To me, humanity's hanging on a cross. We've been sacrificed in a sense and almost punished for wanting to be in our truth, really fighting for our freedom. And we, in a sense, are hung on a cross so that we can go through the death and resurrection based on getting rid of the programmings, the manipulations, and the things that have targeted our minds to separate us from our heart. So if we get back into the heart center, it relieves the mind and all the belief systems that have been put there. I mean, if we got rid of the Illuminati and the shadow government, and we were just left to our own devices, we would discover that we are so programmed, so wounded, and so damaged by the influence that they've had, that even if they were gone, we'd probably self-annihilate. And this is what their mission has been, is to be able to create these false flag scenarios and these wars so that there would be historical resentments, so that there'd be racism, resentment between masculine and feminine, and that they've been pulling the strings to create sort of this catastrophe amongst each other to divide us all, so that even if they left, we would probably destroy ourselves. So this is where we have to capture the truth and understand that something's been pulling all this behind the scenes, that war is a lie, that, these dynamics between masculine and feminine have been targeted, and that this lower force has come in between sacred union. So when one sees Christ Sophia, they'll see sacred union. If one sees the demiurge, they'll see that that force has tried to separate us from sacred union. It's tried to control Mother Earth through HAARP technologies. It's tried to hold her prisoner by manipulating her weather patterns. And this happens to us because they're trying to affect our moods. So people might find that they're depressed, they're anxiety-ridden, and this and that. And it's not just the human condition, it's archonic. They target our minds, and, we're beamed, frequencies are coming through the media, through our cell phones, and all this type of stuff. Mother Earth is experiencing the same thing. So whatever's happening to Gaia is happening to us. Right. So, so if we see, ourselves and Mother Earth, we're all under attack through these technologies, through these frequencies. They're dark rituals that affect the grid lines of the planet. We're all, including Mother Earth, being controlled, being poisoned, being messed with. So we have to understand, if this was our physical body and we were being poisoned or being controlled, we would probably say, enough, no. This is what we're doing as a humanity. We're standing up. There's the Occupy movement. And what is going to heal us from the parasitic forces of the Archons is our immune system, is us standing up and saying no. If somebody's in a relationship with a controlling person, they walk away. If somebody's diseased, they're going to want to raise their immune system in order to expel the virus or the germs or the parasites. And where the immune system is most increased is through the heart center, because the heart center and the fourth chakra connects to the T cells, which connect to the immune system. The Venus transits that are happening and that are increasing with the Mayan calendar and the shift time we're in are bringing the Venus energy stronger and stronger into our planet. The rays of unity consciousness coming out of the galactic core are coming in even stronger. So for us to be free of this force and to create this exorcism, we have to pull our attention away from it and get aligned and get into unity consciousness and get into that love vibration and really do the work with our partners, with our friends, to say, even if we hit a rough patch, we're going to do the work. We're going to give ourselves the time and energy to solve this, to work it out, to understand that, there's other influences besides, just typical issues that are trying to separate us, and that we make that our mission to be stronger than it, to raise our frequencies beyond it, because these are low entities. They're lower fourth dimensional entities. We're dealing with 13 dimensions. We're connected to all of that. We are so much more superior than these vibrations, except they've tricked us, and they've used our belief systems, and they've manipulated history. They've rewritten history, and they've, created all these false flag events to completely take us onto a different program. And this also connects to the tree of good and evil. This whole process is allowing us to initiate ourselves back to the truth and back to wholeness. So when we focus on this and not try and always solve the 3D problems and get into the struggle of the survival about it all, and really raise our consciousness, understanding that our higher selves and source energy will provide for us, the universe will take care of us. We don't have to worry about the material so much. We need to come together. We're going to raise that vibration, and we're going to expel it, just like the immune system expels splinters, diseases, parasites, when one is taking good care of themselves and they're aligned in the positive thinking, and that they have the will to overcome whatever affliction that they have. And as long as we're believing in the stuff that they're feeding us, and as long as we're allowing ourselves to fall into the pits and traps that they've set for us, we're going to be under that system. So if anything is from third chakra to below, if we're feeling powerless, if we're feeling emotional depression, if we're in survival, we have to understand we're functioning on a very small part of our being. And if we could raise it and just, figure out a way to just get beyond that by eating well, by working on, ourselves and doing that soul work, we'll find that that frequency dismantles the false matrix. It actually is higher than these technologies. The technologies with the archonic system, they're imitators. They're not originators. The true source, brings forth the aeons, which are generators. They generate, they regenerate, they heal and restore. Nature, the force of nature, all on its own, only knows how to heal. When we get cut, when we're injured, we don't have to ask our bodies to heal it for us. It knows how. It's our minds that get in the way. So the mind control is to take us out of that rhythm. So we go to doctors. We look to the government. We look to anybody but ourselves for answers. And if we could just get in touch with the fact that nature is always supporting the healing process and always unconditionally loving us, because it's, the manifestation of source energy. Gaia is the living embodiment of that. Sophia is morphed into it. When we connect to her, when we connect to the divine feminine within, we pull her out of that abduction by Hades, which is the archonic system that is holding us hostage. We awaken that force, and that feminine energy rising within men and women is increasing the immune system and literally causing an exorcism. And that's where we are right now. And if we could just align with those truths, we're out of the woods. We are doing that work. It's not going to happen overnight, but we have to understand that healing process is initiated. Now, an infection that gets gangrene, that gets worse, that needs antibiotics, is somebody that's not activating the immune system. They've lost their center. So we don't need that. We don't want that. We don't need to solve our problems with, drastic measures. We need to trust that the forces are on our side. The cosmos is absolutely on our side. When I study, astrology, and I look at all the alignments and everything happening, everything is supporting our ascension process. We're enlightened, ascended beings. The archonic system has invaded something that's natural for us. So as long as we know the invader, as long as we expose the secrets and awaken people to the deceptions that have been going on, they can get back on track. And they'll discover that the co-creation with Gaia and nature is supporting our healing process and our freedom. It is built like that. We see, just the way nature flows. Even when a tree is injured or, something dies, it regenerates, it's reborn, it forms a scab, it gets tougher. And everything in nature is aligned to be able to handle its environment. And that's what we're made of. The archonic system is inorganic. It was birthed out of fear. It was birthed out of confusion. So as long as we're in that vibration, we're feeding it. If we can just rise above it, that's what's going to get rid of it.
Now, do you see the archons, which seem to be this inorganic field of almost particles that invade an individual consciousness, or they invade a species, or they invade an entire planet or a solar system or a galaxy if they can? Do you see that elementary field of archonic entities, kind of the embryonic archonic entities or the reptilian archonic entities. Do you see them kind of disappearing from Earth at some point, or are they always going to be here? And this is like just a really tough planet to incarnate in.
Well, it's kind of both. I mean, it's always sort of going to be there, just like there's always going to be, mosquitoes or flies. But it's like, how are we preparing the camp? Are we attracting them?
Yeah.
Do we know how to handle them if they're there? Can we find an immunity to it? The thing is, we're being ruled by inferior beings to our superior self. And that starts from within. If our lower chakras are ruling us, our power centers, our needs, our desires, our survival fears, then we're cutting ourselves off. But if we're in our higher self, the higher self informs the rest of our being, and it enlightens the rest of our being. If we're in our higher consciousness, we're not in survival as much. We don't feel that pain. We don't feel that desperation. We feel trust. We trust our higher selves. We trust, the divine plan. We trust how everything's unfolding. We feel that positivity. We don't have to trust other humans because they could be very possessed by archons. But when we trust the flow of nature, when we trust our higher self, when we stay in a heart space, when we can just dance with creation, kind of like a sailor, it can control, the sails and the rudder, but it can't control the wind and the water. But when it can learn to dance with the elements, you find that you can co-create and make things happen. But as long as, we're being ruled from another place, we're being ruled by the archons. It's what we want to connect with this source energy. What we want is to find that we're not under that dominion because it's false. And when we can raise ourselves above it, yes, the archons might never go away, but we're senior to it. We're the superior beings, and we've put it in its place. And when it's in its place, it has to answer to us instead of the other way around. It's created a system where we're in our lower chakras in survival, so we're asking for mercy. We're protesting, please stop doing this. When we can really say, instead of empowering what they're doing to us, let's just step way above it and say, no, you're lesser than us. You better answer to us, and you better straighten yourself out, or else you're going to be obliterated off this planet. And that's what's going to happen. Gaia is the supreme being here. The point is she's waiting for us to get a clue because she's chose to have us as her children to co-create with her. And as long as we're not doing our part, she's going to degenerate. But she'll kick us off to restore herself because she's not going to allow this to happen. And we want to be there with her. And we will be, even if there's a whole new creation. The point is we're dealing with multi-dimensions. We're going to, we're going to raise ourselves to another Earth. And that whole system is going to play its own game all on its own. And that's what we discover with the ETs and the treaties with the government. These are future human selves coming back to make sure that they can keep their life cycle alive based on a technological system. We don't have to participate with them. We don't have to be ruled by them. We simply need to say the truth is that we're going to be supported by the universe and Mother Nature. And our unity consciousness is going to give us the power and the vibration to make miracles happen. And this is the alchemy we're in right now. We're turning the inversion of the pentagram upright again, which means spirit is the dominant force. It makes miracles happen. Right now, in the archonic system, the material world is more powerful, and we're being shut down. So everything is relying on money. Everything's relying on, do we have a roof over our head? We're thinking survival, survival. In higher consciousness, things just happen and manifest. And I lived a life that proved that to me when I didn't have money, when I was out in the wilderness. I just made things happen. The universe took care of me because I wasn't in fear. Anytime I was in fear, it would shut down and things would get worse and more difficult. So, I don't think they're going to go away, but when we're senior to it, we don't really notice it, and they end up having to serve us. Just like in the human body, we rule the temple. Every cell, thought, and organ in our body relies on our consciousness to be healthy. But if we start to empower the body, then the sickness takes over. So we have to remember that we're the ultimate authority here, and everything answers to us. The minute we give it power, then we lose ourselves, and it all of a sudden starts to exacerbate the problem, and we get lost, and it starts to win.
So, one function of the archons, or what they attempt to do as sort of a consciousness infection, is to insert themselves into individuals' lives and also as a collective to drag us off to a catastrophic timeline rather than over the aeons, which are the more positive God consciousness particles, which would steer us over to more positive timelines. Is there some accuracy to that kind of a picture, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the whole Mars agenda and the whole Mars cover-up is an archonic system that's covering itself up because it only thrives on secrecy and deception. So the fact that we're exposing this, the fact that we're empowering unity consciousness is, shining the flashlight on what other people haven't been able to see. So as long as we're able to see, you know, it's like somebody who gets a cancer diagnosis. Oh, but I didn't have any symptoms. And all of a sudden, what? I have cancer? You know, these things come upon a person, but there's no real warning. This is why everybody's having such a hard time accepting some of the truths coming out, because there's been no real warning. Yeah. So the Mars agenda and all these cover-ups and the catastrophic timeline, the catastrophic thinking, you know, is empowering the fact that it's heart that's going to create these disasters. But if we align with the positive, if we align with the aeons, which bridge us to source, then we'll find that any catastrophes that happen are Mother Earth detoxing herself from all the germs, the poisons, and the heart technologies, and all the infections that have affected her grid. She needs us to be with her, because we are what's going to lift her and ourselves out of it. And this is a lot easier than we think. I mean, they're so intimidating, but that's how they rule. They infect us so that we start to empower them, and we lose the fact that there's a far, far, far greater power, so far greater that we can't even imagine, that can just make it vanish and dissolve it. I mean, it was born out of lower consciousness, and you know, our higher consciousness is the ultimate authority. And so as long as it makes us forget, then we don't know what we're dealing with, and that's why our DNA has been affected. And so really the missing link does have to do with the feminine energies, because in the dark rituals and everything that they're doing, the Illuminati and the church that kind of runs it has targeted the feminine energy. And in Sumerian times, the Anunnaki, that was when that split happened, and that journey, that alchemical journey that Venus does, had to work behind the scenes in order to complete and continue to give us that life cycle. And we find that on a heart level. When we're willing to dig deep, face our underworld, and expel our own demons, then we help do that for the planet. So we can't fear our darkness. We can't fear our power. We have to go regions that we don't maybe want to go to within ourselves in order to get rid of the gatekeepers that block us from our higher self, and in turn that assists the planet in getting rid of these gatekeepers, which are the archons. And this is a process that we're in, and I think it's going really, really well. And I think, you know, we're the momentum is in our favor, but we can't lose sight of the most important aspect of it, which is frequency. We're in a frequency battle, and that's why they use media, you know, belief systems. The belief systems, where we bought into belief system, is what has dumbed down our DNA far more than any genetic experimentation. And you know, we're not ruled by blood types and bloodlines and all this as much as we think. Consciousness is a higher octave, and it can sort out the rest of us if we can just get in touch with it. We get so lost in the details that we forget the bigger picture and how simple it really is, and what really makes a child thrive. And every bit of adversity that we face is to teach us wisdom, not to turn us into victims. But they want us to believe we're victims. They want the us and them. They want us to stay in duality. So there's positive false flags. For me, the Mars agenda was presented to me as a positive thing. Oh, we'll give you this great position. Oh, this is to protect you in the human genome. Mother Earth doesn't need us to evacuate. Mars is an archonic planet, but we're, you know, seeking to bring the Venus energy and to raise the vibration of Mars into divine will, which is connected to power but aligned with the divine. And if we can all do that within ourselves, then we've beaten the archons. If some don't and others do, then they'll go to another dimension. We don't have to be weighted down by the gravity of others' ignorance, but we're obviously here to help others, you know, cross over, and that's why we incarnated here. Some of us that are aware of this stuff.
Right. Now, we have just a couple of minutes left in this segment. It seems that in past eras, the shamans and the priests and the priestesses were the societal entities that dealt with the archons and that exorcised the archons. In today's society, who exorcises the archons?
We do. I just think, you know, the work that you, Andy, and I are doing is absolutely so potently, you know, working this, because my mission since I was young, and I remember, you know, saying this in my first conference, I was born here to piss off the archons and get rid of them. When I was young, I knew that my role, or that my mission was to dismantle the false matrix, which is the archonic system. So I've made it a point that everything that I do is based on that all my actions, everything that I say is based on that goal. And so I've attracted people to my life, and I work with people that have the same kind of mission. It might be worded differently, but I knew that immediately when I met you, and you know, all the others that I gathered in my life. They're doing it whether they have the terminology or not. That's what we're doing. We're the, you know, there's healers, there's light workers, there's shamans, there's truth tellers, there's whistleblowers, and we all have the abilities of the others. We're just still in the process of awakening those abilities, but our consciousness knows it. We're just allowing our physical body to be able to fully bring it in, because, you know, there's been a lot of programmings that we carry in our ancestral lines. We have ancestral patterns patterns. We have different things that, our genetics have grown accustomed to that we're learning to enlighten and to bring to the truth. And so when we're in that process, we wake up, we realize we're the masters, we're the shamans, we're the light workers, we're the ones that are the aeons that are connecting us to source. We're the bridge. And, being told my connection to Sophia energy my whole life, she's known in mythology to be the one that kicks the archons out. And that's not a single individual, that's the feminine within all of us. So when we bring that to balance within ourselves and awaken the divine feminine energies, we've gotten rid of them because that is what they've targeted. They've abducted her, they tried to take me to Mars. In mythology, they've taken her to the underworld and locked her in her own creative energy and made that their domain. So that's really the key, is to awaken the divine feminine energies. And it's not about gender, it's about the intuitive, the nurturing, the wisdom, and just anything that's about creativity and regeneration and restoration. It's a feminine vibration, but it has to work with the male. It's all about sacred union. It's all about the masculine and feminine working together and bringing those balancing of those two forces back together. A great quote from Caitlin Matthews is, when the feminine energies rise, so too will the imbalances of our world iron themselves out naturally, without any effort. We just simply need to awaken it and understand what that part of us really represents. It's not what we think it is. It's not the image of the feminine that we've seen in the last bunch of years, hundreds of years. It's far deeper, and it's connected to Gaia. It's beyond gender. It's connected to the cosmos and the cosmic womb. And connecting to that is exactly what they don't want us to do, because that is what they've targeted.
Laura, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.